Now I'd like to take some time to go through a couple scenarios comparing how problems are solved on AIA contracted jobs and Consensus Dock contracted jobs. First, we'll see a differing site condition, and then we will see an error. So the big takeaway here is that a contractor is required to stop work and wait for the architect to investigate before they can do anything to a differing site condition, and wait for a change order. We'll see how that works. So here we have a subcontractor putting in an underground pipe, and they run into a rather large rock blocking their path. So the obvious choice is to try and go around the rock, but depending on how big the rock is and what the specifications are, that might put it out of spec, and the subcontractor trying to cover his end is not going to want to do that, because then if somebody hits his pipe later, it is his fault. So you either have to break it up and go through it or dig it out. But that is going to cost the subcontractor a lot more money, and not wanting to accept a loss, he is going to want a change order. Since the subcontractor is only contracted with the general contractor, he first has to find the GC, ask him for a change order, which might result in a conflict right there if the GC doesn't think it counts as a different site condition. But eventually he probably will accept the change order and pass it on to the architect and engineer. Next, the general contractor will call the architect, who has to come to the site to inspect it for himself before he gives a recommendation to the owner on how to proceed. Next, the engineer makes a site visit, and if he feels that it counts as an unknown condition, he will pass the change order on to the owner. This is probably not the first change order this owner has been asked to sign, but if he wants the project finished and wants to avoid litigation, he's just going to have to suck it up and sign the change order and pay a bit more money. The Consensus Docs does not require a contractor to wait for a change order to proceed with an unknown worksite condition, although they can if they choose to. But the risk pool incentives probably make them want to solve this problem as quickly as possible. Confronted with the same problem as before, they may still choose not to go around it, depending on what underground work is happening in that same area later on. But because of the incentive to cooperate with other trade groups, they can choose to ask another trade group to use a piece of big equipment to move this rock out of the way and solve their problem quickly. They still have to contact the architect and engineer and hopefully get a change order to increase the estimated maximum price. But either way, the owner is going to pay for the costs, and so the problem is solved quickly. Now let's see how a conflict resulting from an error is resolved under the AIA contract documents and then consensus documents. Let's imagine we have a temporary power line crossing a haul road, and an operator carrying a bit too much material accidentally snags it. Recognizing that this is a big mistake and is potentially very costly, this subcontractor may be inclined to push the blame off on someone else. Under the AIA documents, there's no contractual obligation for parties to cooperate, and when things go badly, it's essentially everyone for themselves. So everybody tries to blame everybody else when it goes bad. In this case, this subcontractor might try to blame the electrician for putting the power line in too low, and then the electrician might try and blame the engineer for designing the power line too low, and what results is just a big crowd pointing fingers at each other. On a consensus dock job, all parties are contracted together, all parties indemnify other parties up to the point of negligence, and all parties pool the risk and profit and contingency costs. So an accident like this, where the cost of figuring out who is to blame and if they are negligent is probably higher than fixing the problem itself, all parties are incentivized to work together to figure out how to solve it quickly and efficiently, and then If this is a true ILPD project, they will figure out why it happened and prevent it from ever happening again in the future. As you can see under AIA contracted jobs, problem solving can be time consuming and tedious, and it's every person for themselves. While under consensus contracted jobs, different parties are contractually obligated to cooperate and solve problems quickly and efficiently.